1999, there was a man named Vincent Barnum who was 24 years old. He was a normal guy who liked to have fun and make money, even though his childhood was not the greatest, to say the least. His grandparents passed away before he was born. His mother would constantly be drunk or high on any type of drug. His father was never around, but when Vincent was a little boy, his parents would constantly yell at him for things he never did. When he was at school, he was an outcast. Everyone thought he was weird or had something wrong with him, since he would always have a hoodie and jeans on with combat boots. It did not matter what the weather was, he wouldn't wear anything else. As years went on, he was able to prove to everyone that he could make something of himself. He moved away from his hometown to start fresh. He got a great job where he was making $12,000 a year. He had a nice house to always come home to. Vincent finally was able to make some friends, even though it took him a little bit. Everything was going very well for him. On Halloween night, he was walking home from drinking at a bar with his friends. It was cold, and the world just seemed quiet, maybe too quiet. When he walked, it seemed like he had a small limp, since he was just a little too drunk. He managed to get to the front door of his house, but something seemed weird to him. He looked around to make sure he wasn't being followed. It was only in his imagination, which made him laugh to himself. I must have had too much to drink. He goes inside, takes his shoes off, and just goes straight to bed. When he was dead asleep, he began to dream, but it wasn't any normal dream. No, it was a terrifying nightmare. He was trapped inside a home with no windows or doors. The demonic force was making him freeze in his tracks, lifting him in the air, forcing his limbs to rise. As his eyes become ghostly white, the demon makes Vincent's mouth open as it stares into his soul, making him float closer and closer until it was almost able to touch his nose. The demon transfers something into Vincent, but before we could know, he rose from his pillow, drenched in sweat, to the point of being able to see dark spots in his shirt. He looks around, sighing in relief that it was only a nightmare. So he thought. He takes off the blanket and gets out of bed to get himself a glass of water from the kitchen. But he had a weird pain in his neck, like it was burning, which made him rub it a little bit and get a washcloth. Wetting it a bit with cold water, he sets it on his neck for a small period of time as he goes back to bed with his water. Before he lays back down, he changes his shirt, then covers himself back into his blanket to go back to sleep. It was the next morning, and the sun lit up his room, making him wake up, squinting his eyes while groaning a little bit since it was extremely bright. He sits up in his bed, grabbing his phone, and he goes to respond to his friends. As he felt that pain again in his neck, that weird burning sensation, he went to rub his neck again. The pain didn't go away like last time. It had only grown stronger than before. He goes to get a glass of water again and gets some medicine from his medicine cabinet. He takes it as he grabs another cold washcloth. He goes into his room to get ready for the busy day he had planned, goes to leave his house, and locks the door behind him. While walking to his car, he felt himself get extremely dizzy and held himself up by holding onto his car. He shook it off and unlocked the door, getting inside, putting the keys in the ignition, then fixed his mirrors. But when he did, there was someone in the back seat staring right at him that had wet hair and just looked like it had crawled out a swamp, or worse, a sewer. It had eyes that could kill if it looked at you. Its body had large gashes that looked like it was so deep you can see the tissue and bone. Its flesh was a pale color. When it smiled, it had teeth that were sharp like razor blades. Blood was seeping out from each corner, as it just lets out a menacing yet spine-chilling laugh. He jolts and turns to look back there fast. Strangely, there was no one sitting there, so he just rubbed his eyes, turning back around and began to drive to his job, which was only 12 minutes away from his house. He got into the parking lot of the building, but he began to have a weird cough that made him grab a tissue he had in his car. When he put it to his face, he had coughed up this black slimy substance that made his eyes go wide when he saw it. He freaked out a bit, but that didn't stop him from getting himself pulled together and going to work that day. Grabs his suitcase and turns off the car as he gets out. Beginning to walk to the front door of the place, he had a bad feeling in his stomach, like he felt like he was rotting from the inside out. Luckily, a co-worker named Alice was walking in at the same time. She saw what was happening and ran over to Vincent to help him back to her car. She helped him into the vehicle, getting into the driver's seat. While driving him to the hospital, would constantly look over at him as he was groaning in pain and had his eyes closed. "It is all okay, Vincent. You are gonna get help. We are almost there," she said worryingly. She pulls into the hospital parking lot, helping him out of the car and into the hospital. He was immediately admitted to a room, but when the doctors were checking on him and doing all the treatments they could think of, there was nothing wrong with him. The doctors did not see anything on the X-rays or the brain scans, so the doctors made him and Alice leave since there was nothing else they were able to do for him. So she drives him back to his place, helps him inside and into his bed, but he was still groaning and started to feel burning hot, so she helped him to his bathroom and gave him a cold bath. But of course, Alice didn't undress him because that would be pushing boundaries. So she put him in the bath, but the bath began to turn into the color black, and there was a prickly substance moving in the water. She was in disbelief at what she was witnessing before her eyes. Vincent's body started to form these welts, and they popped open as there was green pus falling out of each one. His eyes became black as midnight sky. His teeth became sharp as more of them came into place. As he let out a violent yell, which freaked her out, didn't have a clue about what was happening or how to stop it. Slowly backing away from him as the water began to boil as he rose out of the water, was looking down at the ground as he began to laugh. It wasn't any ordinary laugh. It sounded like it was coming from something else. "Vincent?" she says, deciding to go towards him, touching his shoulder, but his hand grips her hand with inhuman strength as he slowly looks up at her with a chilling smile. Blood mixed with saliva was dripping from his mouth as Alice was frozen in place, seeing him change into someone or something she didn't recognize. She tried everything to get out of his grip. She looks around and finds a glass bottle, so she takes the chance and hits him with it on the side of his head. Once able to get away, she ran downstairs to get out of there. Little did she know, Vincent was somehow already there, pushing her with a strong force, causing her to fly across the room, slamming back first into a glass cabinet, causing glass to shatter, and getting it into her arm. Closing her eyes in pain, slowly getting the glass out of her arm. When she opened her eyes, she could see him getting closer towards her. She gets up fast and runs away from him. Didn't realize that she'd been cornered. He was coming closer and closer with a smile on his face. But before she could do anything else, he stabbed her with a piece of glass from the other room. She screams for help as he repeatedly raises his hand up in the air with a piece of glass, down into her chest, stabbing deeper, piercing through her heart. Blood was splattering everywhere inside the room. Her cries for help became quieter and quieter, taking the last breaths of life and dying. Lights of police cars make the house become bright like daylight, breaking down the door with guns in hand, going to find him in the room, seeing the blood and Alice's dead body. Vincent was standing there as his eyes had changed to a deep, dark red. Dropping the piece of glass, an officer puts their flashlight on him as he stands there. They all didn't waste time, shooting him 28 times, making him collapse to the ground, laying there choking on his own blood. The officers shot him 2 more times, which finally killed him. 20 years later, on Halloween of 2018, there was a small group of high school students. Jasper, Ally, Dale, Sam, and Calvin. Their age range is 17 and 18. They didn't really like being in the popular crowd, since it wasn't something they did not want attention drawn to themselves. Sam threw a sleepover, as Jasper was telling the story of Vincent. It was the anniversary of the incident. Ally was clinging on to Dale since she was the only one of the group who gets scared easily. Calvin and Sam thought it was a splendid idea to contact him through the Ouija board, and at the very house it all went down, considering the house hasn't been touched since that very night. But Jasper did not think it was a great idea. The others began chanting, "Let's do it," which made him cave in. So they all drive to Vincent's house and sneak inside. All of them check the place out, seeing the bloodstains still in the woodwork. Of course, Allie was clinging onto Dale once again. But as they go deeper into the house, Sam found the perfect spot. She was the one who had the book bag that carried the board and some candles. It was going to happen in the room that Alice was killed in, so they start to set the board up and put the candles around it. Calvin takes his lighter and begins to light the candles one by one. "Okay guys, let's sit in a circle around the board," Jasper said, looking at his friends, which they do exactly that, putting their 2 fingers onto the planchette and began to ask the board questions. Just as expected, nothing was happening. They weren't getting no answers. All of them sighed and began to pack the board up, but before they could get to the candles, there was a strong gust of wind, blowing out the candles and making them get chills creeping up their backs, beginning to freak out, standing up and looking around, hearing an eerie noise. It sounded like nails dragging across the wall. The teens cover their ears and squint their eyes closed until it is silent again. Jasper decided to look through the planchette and saw Vincent standing next to Dale, gasping as he makes Dale shoot up into the air. His arms start to go up as his legs spread open. The rest just watched in fear, watching their friend's limbs start to get pulled onto. As the sound of his flesh being ripped apart, it sent them to have a heavy weight in their stomachs. Dale screams in pain as it happened so fast. His bones snapped apart, and he was in 2 pieces, falling to the ground, as blood was all over the room. All of them scream, running towards the door, but can't get the door open. They kept trying as they could hear a burst of demonic laughter behind them, running from the door, trying to get away. But soon enough, Ally and Sam get dragged back. Both of them were forced to tear into each other. Their guts and organs spill out from them after ripping open each other's bodies. Jasper and Calvin were able to hide inside the basement and start to figure out a plan on how to stop him permanently. But they were able to hear the last 2 of their friends die from upstairs. Their eyes filled up with tears, but that didn't last long before they had to act quickly. Jasper found some of Vincent's belongings after looking through boxes, but what he found was items that were for spirits. One of the items was a book that was to stop entities and demonic forces. So both Calvin and Jasper repeat the words to themselves. As they looked through the box more, finding a bottle of holy water, a rosary, and salt, they looked at each other, knowing what was to be done. They could hear him coming. Calvin began to create the circle that consisted of salt doused in holy water. Once they heard and saw Vincent go inside the circle, Jasper held up the rosary as Calvin and himself started to chant the holy words from the book. Vincent lets a demonic scream in pain as he begins to spin, and a black mist forms around his spirit. The boys continue to chant the words over and over, but stops after everything went silent, and a bright light makes the room become white as snow. They could see Vincent before all of what had happened to him. He softly smiles and nods, thanking them, as his spirit rises in the air and disappears. The both of them look at each other as they hug and yell in happiness that they did it. When walking up the stairs, they could see the blood and insides of all of their friends, causing them to cry and never be able to get the images and the situation out of their heads. 4 years later, Jasper and Calvin were now 21 and 22. They had been going to therapy to help get their minds straight. But every night when they go to bed, they would see flashbacks of that very night and wake up in sweat and tears. They could still hear the screams and sounds of ripping bodies, which caused them not being able to sleep for the rest of the nights. But since that day, there was no more of Vincent, and no more incidents had occurred. Calvin and Jasper would also go to the graveyard every day to visit their friends' graves and talk to them about their days. But they both did have good-paying jobs and lived together in a small apartment, so they hope and pray that their lives will hopefully go back to normal one day. It was all over? Or is it?